What is this place?
Can you tell me your name?
What's out there? Every morning when those doors open, the runners look for a way out. And no one has ever survived a night in the maze.
No, but you're gonna follow the rules. Can you tell me anything about yourself? Who you are, where you came from? Can you tell me your name?
I can't remember anything.
When the world ended, Queen was at home. Nothing about how her day had been going so far even suggests that the apocalypse was upon them. She had gone to work in the morning and returned from her boring job behind the scenes of the local theater late that afternoon. The feeling of jealousy when seeing the gracious ballerinas on the stage never faded. Knowing that in another life it could have been her standing there. Ever since her brother had been arrested, she hadn't even looked at the white stuff that used to be her life. She was slowly trying to rebuild her broken life. If it weren't for the withdrawal symptoms that still plagued her at times, her life would seem normal. Now, other days seem to go by in slow pace. Every day the same. Every day another battle against her own dark thoughts.
The sound of the television echoed through the living room as she stood in the kitchen, cooking dinner for herself. Queen had never been particularly good at cooking, but it wasn't like she had the money to eat out every day. As long as nothing tasted burned, she was satisfied. While the newscaster kept talking about some problem with the CDC, Queen put her food on a plate and took it with her towards the living room, ready to search for something more fun on the TV when her attention was captured by the next word of the newscaster. Authorities are warning everyone to stay inside and keep the roads free so the army will be able to pass through.
Almost as if her thoughts were a cue, the sound of rotating blades came from outside. She jumped on her feet and ran towards the window, pulled aside the curtain, and stared up to the sky. At least 5 helicopters flew over her apartment, leaving a loud noise to echo over the streets. Running back to the television, Her eyes slightly widened at the footage that showed nothing but chaos. People were running around, packing their cars and getting ready to leave. She didn't understand what the hell was going on and sat back down on the couch so she could listen to the next words of the now terrified-looking newscaster. A virus that the authorities claimed to have been contained is now spreading fast. And while the properties of the virus are still unknown, it is believed to be extremely dangerous.
Queen had heard rumors of such a virus going around, but thought them to be just that, rumors. Now, however, when the whole world seemed to be going crazy, it couldn't be just rumors anymore. Still, she didn't understand why people would try to live. Staying inside with a virus going around seems much smarter. But her question was quickly answered when the camera cut the abusive streets. We are now getting live footage from New York City, where the army is trying their best to contain the virus. The camera showed a barricade made out of army vehicles in the middle of the road and soldiers shooting at civilians.
The queen leaned closer to the screen, the feeling of stone-cold dread spreading as she watched the army shoot at seemingly innocent civilians. Confused, she squinted at the screen and suddenly she noticed something was off, very off. She just couldn't quite grasp what it was. Not until the camera zoomed in and her eyes widened. Shocked. She was shocked. Guess that those people were dead and they are walking. Their eyes were hollow, their flesh barely hanging like drunken men. Her mind was spinning at the one and the only one question. How?
Then the footage got back to the studio, where the newscaster seemed to be getting more pale with each passing second. The army has no other people to get to see which substance is closest to you. In blink, the lightest star at the screen suddenly went blank. For a second, she just sat there, staring at the black screen. Her mind seemed to be in total shock, trying desperately to comprehend in even the slightest way what she just saw. But the more she thought about it, the more her head started to ache. It was like she had suddenly been put in a movie set without clear orders what to do. Then there was one word that broke through the confusion, the most powerful instinct that she had followed all her life, and she didn't hesitate to listen to it now.
Run! Queen jumped up and ran upstairs, quickly grabbed her backpack out of the closet, and threw in some sweater, jeans, a shirt. Then she put on a jacket and her boots. After that, she ran to the bathroom, grabbed a brush and some toothpaste. Her hands went to the top shelf. The horrible things about going through her withdrawal was that there wasn't any medication. She just had to endure the pain. Of course, there were things as pills against headache and pills to break down fevers. And so, she didn't have to think twice to take those and put them in a bag too.
She ran downstairs, headed to the kitchen, and opened the cupboard. She took anything that was eatable and put it in the bag. Then she opened the drawer and took out the kitchen's knife. Carefully put it behind her belt before heading to the hallway. The routine of packing in a hurry was something she was familiar with. There had been many times she had been forced to leave her home and head for some sort of safe house. Whenever Marcus would have another tantrum, or there was an all-out war between his dark empire and another one. Only this time, she wasn't running from the arrogance of men. She was running from something much scarier.
The last thing she grabbed were her car keys from the table, and then she ran outside. The street was a complete chaos. Cars were all over the place, and people were running up and down with bags in their hands. She let out a frustrated groan, immediately knowing she would never be able to get to her own car like this. Her gaze went up and down the street, trying to somehow get a grip of the situation and figure out how to get to the closest safe zone. Her eyes landed on a family, a father with 3 backpacks on his back, holding his daughter's hand as he pulled her along. And then an idea struck her.
Her own father lived on the edge of the town. If she could get to his car, then she could get away. Throwing one look on her watch, she slightly smiled. Usually he came around this time, completely wasted. He wouldn't even notice if a bomb went off right next to him. Meaning he wouldn't even notice the world dying around him either. Suddenly that's her mind. She shouldered her bag and then started in a slow jog down the street, careful not to run anyone over. When she rounded her corner, her eyes slightly wide, an enormous tank was parked in the middle of the street. A soldier was standing on top of it with a megaphone in his hand. Please proceed in an orderly fashion towards the safe zone.
Maps with the fastest route will be handed out to you at the end of the street. He kept on repeating the message, but she barely heard it as she started making her way down the street. Helicopters flew over. People were screaming and children were crying. The noise was pressing against her skull. Trying to calm her breathing, she struggled her way through the crowd. People were pressing against her, pushing their way forward, and she almost lost her balance twice. Closing her eyes, she forced herself to focus on her breathing and count to 10. Hearing her brother's calming voice echo through her head. When they were little, she used to have panic attacks whenever her claustrophobia kicks in.
What is that? Mila would sit by her side and tell her to breathe slowly and count to 10. Trying to gain back control, the method rarely failed. She opened her eyes again and started running. She longed for fresh air and being able to walk without anyone touching her. She ran faster, knocked her shoulder against someone and bit her tongue when the sharp sting went to her arm. Someone screamed angrily at her, but she ignored it. The urge to escape was bigger than her empathy for other people at the moment. Finally, she reached the end of the street, completely out of breath, even though she hadn't been running very fast. While trying her hardest to calm herself, she walked up to one of soldiers who was handing out maps.
He watched her coming and turned to her. "You're all alone, ma'am?" She simply nodded. Handing her a map, He started explaining which route she could take best, but somehow her mind refused to focus. Frowning, she stared at the map in her hand as his fingers went over the line until suddenly it became clear to her why. The smell of rotten flesh and dried blood hung in the air like a thick poisonous fog. She turned in a small circle, trying to determine where it was coming from, but she couldn't see anything through the thick crowd of people that surrounded her. She turned back to the soldier in front of her when he suddenly stopped talking.
Stumbled back in sudden dust. He stood there with his eyes wide open as a death attacked him from behind, biting him in his neck. Bolt came in a wave out of the wound as he made a terrible sound. His hands gave out and he fell down immediately, being attacked by their other dead people. There jumped in his eyes by smell of death and Bolt has easy words which her mouth open how their tear right through him. She could look away, her eyes give to the scan as his inside slowly became his outside. They were actually eat him. Crimson red balls hit dripping off their hands and out of their mouths they tore him apart.
Queen would never know how she recovered from her shock, but suddenly she was running the other way. Pushing confused and scared people out of her path while running as fast as she could, all the while tightly clutching the map the soldier had given her. Then came the scream. High, low, woman, children and men. They echoed between the buildings, leaving a ring in her ears. And then people were running with her as the street erupted even more chaos. She didn't look back, forced herself to keep moving as the dead devoured the people behind her. Shaking her head to stop the image from torturing her mind, she ran, feeling every step she took punching through her body.
Turning right at the end of the street, she let out a small window of relief upon only seeing people who were alive. They all looked at her running past them, frowning at her, silently asking why she was running the other way. "They coming!" she screamed, unable to stop herself from a sudden urge to save these people from their stupidity. Still, they didn't seem to grasp. It's not until other people rounded the corner as well, and then the whole street came alive. More screams, children crying, and car engines roaring to life. She kept her eyes focused on the road before her as she ran. 3 times she was almost run over by a car, but she managed to get through without many incidents. Although her arm was still aching from the impact earlier. pushed herself to run faster. Her feet carried her out of the street as the scream slowly faded to a dull noise in the background. She ran through alleyways and abandoned streets, never stopping and never looking back. Her haunted breath blurred her own ears as she ran through the streets. The entire edge of the city seemed to have turned into a ghost town, and it terrified her how quickly everything had changed. In the distance, screams still sounded, and she didn't want to think about if they belonged to people dying or people running for their lives.
My name Diaz, and I've been in this, I don't know, a forest, I guess, for a few days. And there's a weird mansion back there, but I don't want to get there. I heard a lot of screams from there. I'm scared of that. And, well, I figured that I'm in some kind of maze. Well, it's kind of open, yeah, but I'm still twirling around and around like there's no way to exit this fucking place. But well, this is our Discord. Please someone tell me that I love them. I'm sorry for not being a great humankind to anyone that knows me. I'm sorry if you ever find this place. And yeah, of course, it was already turning dark when she reached the street where her father lived. On her way there, she saw a few people, and she thought if they were the only survivors from the mass downtown, it was sickening for her. So she forced that thought of her mind, and she finally reached her father's house. Her body suddenly ached. Nerves took over it. And yeah, she hadn't been back there since she was 12 years old, and suddenly she became very aware of the scars on her arms and her butt and her back. Well, shaking her head, she lifted out the doormat, knowing her father always leaves the key there. She picked it up and opened the door, lock it, go in. Immediately the smells of alcohol and vomit greeted her nose. Though it was better than the stench of death, seemed determined to stay there. And yeah, she scanned the drawers, looking for his keys, his car keys, and though she knew where her father always put them, she still wished she could avoid going further into the house, but apparently the ending of the world meant she had to face her father once again. As she walked into the living room, her arms slightly I changed my place. That sound earlier scared me, and here I am in some weird structure. But well, as she walked to the living room, her hands slightly trembling, and what she saw there widened her eyes a little bit. It was the scenery of pizza boxes, beer bottles scattered on the ground, a hell of a mess. And yeah, she went through the room, her eyes went through the room, and she noticed a dark figure lying on the couch, and it was her father, fast asleep. She slowly walked over to where the bookcase stood, and her hands reached out to the keys on the third shelf, quickly grabbed them, and then she ready to leave again. But on her exit, however, she turned around to look at her father, fast asleep on the couch. She walked over to where the bookcase stood. Her hands reached out for the keys on the third shelf, and then she quickly grabbed them and ready to leave again. On her exit, however, she stopped and turned around to look at her father, asleep on the couch. She took steps toward him, only to stop at the middle again. The scars of the belt on her back was burning her skin, and the pain still so vivid on the back of her mind, screaming for her to walk away. The world is ending dead, she whispered to him, but no reaction came. Just what you wanna know, she said, as her eyes scanned his whole body as he kept on sleeping on the couch. She didn't understand why she cared about him so much then. He never cared about her, and she didn't want to start caring about him either. So she turned on her feet and she walked away. She left the house and locked the doors behind her. She thought it would provide some safety from the dead. Throwing one last look over her shoulder, she saw the house where she grew up in, but she shook her head, pushing the memories away. She had to stay focused now. Walking toward the car, she opened the door and threw her bags in. She was taking a seat behind the wheel when she took the map the soldier had given to her out of her pocket. She could make it. She was going to make it. The thought fueled her determination when she was driving the car out of the town she used to call home. And that is the story of one Queen Morels. Whatever the story means to you, whatever it tells you, please make a good use of it. Because that is all that we can do, all 18 of us. So